would say as growth designers, what I'm looking for is how do I make this onboarding screen more effective for our acquisition?
Hey guys, good afternoon and welcome to the Growth Design Podcast. My name is Emmanuel, and today we're going to be talking about the traits of a growth designer. And I'm not going to be talking alone, but I have a guest with me here today. His name is Ray Wallace. I will allow him to do his introduction, and we dive into the conversation. Hi Ray, how are you doing?
Yeah, hi, Manuel. Yeah, I'm Ryan Wallace. I am a growth product designer located in downtown Toronto, which is in Canada. And currently, I have been a growth designer for about a year and a half now.
Oh, amazing, amazing. So, can you tell us a little bit about your hobby? What you do. If you're not designing, what else do you do? Just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so for my personal hobbies, I would say that I like to consume a lot of media. I watch a lot of movies. I've spent a lot of money on my own personal sound system here at home so I can have that movie theater experience because these last 2 years I couldn't go to the theaters. And I would say that I'm a bit of a gamer. I'm a bit of a patient gamer, to be honest. So I don't have all the latest games, but I do have some old gems that I'll play from time to time. A current game that I'm playing with my girlfriend right now is called It Takes Two on PS4, and that game is just a blast. It's a very collaboration focused game, and you can only play it with two people. So that is some of the hobbies that I do pretty much. And then, yeah, just I like hanging out with friends. I like going out to different restaurants, and I like to get myself involved in different communities. So I'm always drifting through digital space to one digital space to another.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I wouldn't call myself a gamer though, but as designer, we always have something out there that we do just to cool off and just to bring back that creative juice. And I think part of it is playing game. I also love playing FIFA. Yeah, or maybe sometimes I play PES, but I actually love playing it real time, like on the field. Yeah. So. Can you tell us about your role, your current role at Century? Just a little bit about it.
Yeah, for sure. What happened was throughout my whole career as designer, I was one of the new breeds of designers, at least here in Canada, where I just learned UI UX raw. And I call that UI UX raw because a lot of people that I've listened to and a lot of people I've met have a very strong graphic design background, visual design background. But when you're coming out of school learning UI UX, you're applying right for those UI UX jobs. But it's actually quite funny because one of my very first roles was still a visual designer. And as designers, I've learned that I have always been caught between marketing and technology teams, right? You're always helping marketing with their efforts and you're also working on the product itself. And I've always been in that role throughout my whole career, whether I was working with AI or financial technologies or developer platforms. And when in 2019, my CEO asked me, Ryan, which team would you like to be a part of, the marketing team or the technology team? And I asked him, can I be on both? That's where I really felt the strongest. I really liked the marketing efforts. I really enjoyed onboarding, but getting too deep into intense workflows for the products and I would say that very heavy user personas and creating certain sets within the product, I felt that wasn't where my strength was. I liked working on onboarding. I liked focusing on acquisition. I liked the marketing efforts as well. But I also liked creating the UI and making the product a lot better. So from there, I've learned that when I applied for a role at Sentry, I was originally applying as someone in data and dashboards, right? I was working on the visualization team. And when I was going through the interview process, my manager, Chris, he said he feels my skills would align better with the growth team, right? And he feels like that's where my strengths lie. So then that's when I knew what growth was. And I discovered the growth designers Slack community channel. And then from there, they were able to show me what growth is. And they're like, you're one of us, right? You're caught between these two teams. We exist. And then from there, I've continued to uh, work in growth and continue to push myself. And from Century, I recently accepted a offer working for Weight Watchers as their growth designer as well. So I'll be on their growth team.
Yeah, amazing. Congratulations right away. So let's talk about what your manager could have seen in you. That it could have proposed to you to join the growth team at Century. Let's talk about those traits that you must have as a designer to be considered a growth designer. Can you just dive deep into that? Just starting a conversation around there.
I would say that one of the main qualities I would say is understanding data and having a very data driven mindset. And I would say that when you're a designer and you're doing a lot of user testing, a lot of making personas, a lot of understanding your users, many of us don't really fully get deep into the data and into the weeds. We often create products, I would say, that fits a very certain user type. But I would say what make growth designers a little bit more interesting is we would go on to platforms like Amplitude and Mixpanel, and that's where it really drives our design decisions. So like that's where I think is a trait of learning learning how data works, understanding it, and having a little bit more of a logical mindset when you're tackling on a project. I think that's where I found my strongest traits.
Yeah, great. So, apart from understanding data, having a logical mindset, do you really think as a growth designer you should have good UI skills?
I would say it's actually quite interesting. I would say yes. Yes, having good UI skills, I think, is a part of the job. I think that if you're viewing design into a rabbit hole of floors and you're going down into it deeper, there are some skills where you should have going into growth design because I would argue that becoming a growth designer is a bit of a specialization within the design field itself. And if you're coming in and you need to have your standard design skills, and then you could take those design skills and really apply growth skills on top of it. I'm viewing it more of like a sandwich, right? Your meat is your product UI skills, and then everything else on top of that is how you specialize it.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's great. That's great. So, what are other traits and qualities, apart from the data aspect, that you think one should really develop as a growth designer?
I would say that it's definitely communication skills. Communication skills is very, very important as growth designers because our history is related to the marketing team, and marketing needs to have very strong communication skills. And if you could use very few words when you're creating that user experience, that and then you could able to translate that into your users, then you could see significant growth. And I would say definitely having skills of adaptability as a growth designer because everything is always changing, the data changes, how you acquire user changes, and if you're working on a multi-generational product where there's different types of age range of users, you need to adapt your product based on that generation and how they approach it. So I would say that those are some of the most important skills.
That's great. So, talking about research, you've talked so much about the data part, about quality UI skills, but there's something so particular about product design in general. We talk more about customer research. We talk more about doing quantitative research, doing all sort of
Mhm.
research. So, as a growth designer, what do you think? Or how do you really separate yourself when you are doing
Mhm.
research that is really different from a product designer?
Mhm. I would say that our research is less focused on the how to explain it. It's less focused on the workflow of the user, and I would say it's more focused on the AARRR funnel as and that's the type of research that we go for. So I would say that if you're a regular product designer, you're looking for the best UX experience for this onboarding screen. right? You want to make sure everything is placed well, everything clicks well, the product flows smoothly, everything is cohesive. I would say as growth designers, what I'm looking for is how do I make this onboarding screen more effective for our acquisition, right? That's the themes that I look for. How
Yeah,
do I make this onboarding experience increase our retention? That's what I'm going for. That's what I look for. Because as a regular product designer, right, you really care about the best experience, right? But your
yeah,
experience doesn't necessarily have a theme about what you're really going for. I think that's what
yeah,
separates us. Because when I was looking for products and looking for inspiration, I would just search, right? I'd go on Behance, I'd go on Dribble, and I'll just search up UIs for inspiration. I would really read the designer forums and see what people are building. And I would apply best UX practices. But if I'm going for retention or if I'm looking for
yeah,
a revenue increase, I need
yeah.
something very specific. And that's what growth designers do. That's where the separation of research, data, and understanding.
Yeah, I think I like the aspect where you mentioned about the AAR funnel for product designer generally are not used to such terms. So will you be able to elaborate more about the product funnel or the ARR model a
Clarify
little
that.
bit just to really
Yeah. So I would say that the ARR funnel, right, really, it's very important to growth designers. And there's currently a debate right now saying that you should be following funnels over growth loops, right, back and forth. But I would say that as of the most basic understanding for growth designers just coming in, right, you really want to focus on awareness, acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, and referral. Right, those are the main themes you will be focusing on as a growth designer, and that's how you should be approaching your designs. So if you're on a growth team, right, like I am, and we get a new project, I think it's very important that you set a theme for that project, because a lot of the time as product designers, you get a project and you receive this project and you're just kind of focused on the best user experience. You don't necessarily, there is a goal in some sense, but there really isn't that hard hitting theme, right? You really want to focus on. I want to focus on activation,
yeah.
right? Right. What are some of the steps that I need to do to increase activation? And you could argue that is it sacrificing user experience? I would say no. You are just changing the direction of the user experience to fit within that theme.
Yeah, so you mentioned more about not sacrificing the user experience for you to achieve a goal or to achieve a particular theme as a code designer. So, but then it's about changing the direction of the experience to achieve the goal, which is very, very valued. And so, how do you match that overall experience for a product or for a customer and getting them to achieve your goal, as a product, as a growth designer, to maybe onboard them or to get them back using the product. So how do you match both goal as
Yeah, I would say that the thing to focus on is you need to be asking the right questions, right? Is this a business driven focus? And I think we need to be honest with our team and have those conversations and say that this is a revenue focused feature we're going for. And I think many of the design teams don't like having those conversations because we're very caught up in the design and the user and making sure that the user is having a good time. And yes, the user needs to have a good time, but we also need to understand that there are certain business metrics that we need to do as designers. And our goal is let's create the best experience, but let's also understand that this is focused on a part of the AARR funnel, right? And how I like to approach that is simply honesty and transparency with the team. I want to make sure everyone's on board. I want to make sure that the business goals are aligned as well. And how I like to mash them up is
yeah,
as we're building something, I would approach it in the sense of, okay, everyone, if this is an awareness focused, right, what can we do from a marketing standpoint to increase the awareness, but ensure that the user experience does well from a product standpoint. That's what I really go for. And we just start going out into Fig Jam, and we just start sketching out ideas. We start working on collaboration. And I really want to get the right people involved because as growth designers, you are in the middle of product and marketing, and you have to make sure that both sides are fairly being represented.
Yeah, I totally agree with you with that, Ensuring everyone is on board, having that clear collaboration practice, I think is really essential. Getting the right people on board, the marketing side, just getting essentially everybody on the team that needs to help you achieve your goal, getting them on board and ensuring that all sides are equally represented, and having that clear goal in mind, I think is really going to be a key in matching a good experience and also achieving a goal as a product designer, which is absolutely great. So I'm moving. Let's talk more about a growth designer at work. As a product designer, one of the things we pride ourselves for is ensuring that you can take a product from an idea phase to shipping it out and having that overall good experience. But as a growth designer, it's a little bit different. We talk about experimenting. We talk about growth loops. Talk about funnels. So can you tell us a little bit about those buzzword in growth,
Mhm.
experimentation, iteration, and all those? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that definitely experiments are a big part of what we do, right? It is
Yeah.
massive, right? We need to try something over and over again until it sticks, and having the business and having the leadership team have those same values is very important because as growth designers as well, we also can tell you what you shouldn't spend time on, what you
Yeah.
shouldn't invest in, because a lot of the time we just have a lot of experiments going on at once. And some experiments, I would argue, are really far out there. And we have other experiments where it is it is something that's a very, very small change, and that will allow the product to move forward. But I would say that some of the best products that have growth teams have some of the most
Yeah.
experimental things, and they get added on to the core product, right? A lot of
Yeah.
anything in beta, if you've ever registered your account for beta access, that's all growth teams just trying
Yeah.
out things that work. And there are some engineering teams as well, but really it's growth team, right? Anything with demos, betas, and alphas. I would argue you see a lot of growth teams there. And what I'm doing to really ship products is when we're designing a product, right? Sometimes you would have a small sample size of, let's say, 1,000 people, right? You really want to jot down what the feelings are, right? The path that they're following onto the product if they're not bouncing, and you
Yeah.
really want to ensure that these groups of users is a certain type of persona that you're really going for, and you're really just trying to tweak certain levers just to see if you can get your product into a certain standpoint, because there's only certain things that you can do within a product that can push into a new direction, and each user entering that product will have a very different experience, especially if they're part of that sample size. So you want to make sure that the product in the perception of the user fits the theme that you're going for, because if I'm coming to your product, I may view it as a very serious product, while another user may view it as a more fun and laid back product. And which user will which user would allow for more activation or more
Yeah.
revenue? That's what we're trying to see. What's the perception of the product? Right? How do I change your perception? And that's what it is all about.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great. There's something I also want us to dive deep into. It's about experimentation. I know it's a
Mhm,
very big part of growth design because
mhm.
that's how we validate our solutions. That's how we really know if this really works. So, how do you, in your day-to-day activities, how do you validate or how do you run experimentation in your team? Are there tools? Or how do you do it differently from how a product designer validates solution?
Mm. Mm. The two main differences are, I would say that for growth designers, when you're trying to validate experimentation, you're really trying to
Yeah,
drive the user to a certain point within the product, and you're really trying to get them to take a certain action in it, while I would say that product designers generally more focus on the overall experience of the product. Right, this is the experience that we're going for. I want to have everyone have a good time on the product. It's very smooth
yeah,
and it works, but a lot of the time it's very directionless. It's very like, let's just rush the user through the onboarding experience, get them into the product, and now they're using it.
yeah,
But there is no there is a direction sort of, but there's not necessarily an exact pinpoint. And I would say that for growth designers, you're breaking it down into many pieces, and you're making that part of the product align, especially if you're working in loops or using the AARR funnel, right? You can really pinpoint and say, for this onboarding experience, I'm looking to increase
yeah,
activation very specifically, and I'm going to keep
yeah,
experimenting until I see the highest activation. While when I was a generalist, I would say I want the overall onboarding experience to be cohesive, and I believe it should make sense and it should have a very good UX. But am I focused on pushing the user forward? Is the real question. And that's where marketing teams actually struggle with product teams, right? Marketing wants to try something, right? Product says no. Product wants to try something. Marketing team isn't sure if it's worth their time
yeah,
marketing it out and really pushing those paid views. So it's in those sense, I would say that's what growth designers do. I can take the information, I say, this is our goal, and I can take that to the team and I say, this group of 1,000 users did the action that we're hoping for. Right, we were able to get them to go through the onboarding experience
yeah.
specifically for activation on this part. Right, now let's work on part two. Now let's work on part three. Right, let's push them down, and then if something goes wrong, you can always revert back, because a lot of the time designers look at the entire picture or one whole feature. I say as growth designers, we really narrow down in. We really focus on a very key part, the main feature broken down into 10 parts.
Yeah, that's good. So in terms of validating this experimentation, boiling down to a specific user journey or specific goal, how do you get to measure this impact, and how do you measure the impact of your work or of this particular feature as a good designer?
I would say at Century, we specifically use Amplitude to really check how our experiments are going and what they do. We also have Looker, we also have Pendo, and we also use other various products. But I would say Amplitude is a pretty big one. And because the reason why I like Amplitude is you can pretty much ask Amplitude almost anything. And if you put all the right ID tags on your product, Amplitude can really give you some core information that you're looking for, especially if it can tell you where users are going afterwards on the platform if they don't bounce. And I would say that that right there is very important, because you could generate a report saying that this is how the experiment's doing and this was our goal and what it's currently hitting at. And using that type of ideology, you're able to ship products a lot faster because you have that data to back it up, and not necessarily having anecdotal evidence. Because I think that's what a lot of designers end up having, is a little bit of anecdotal evidence from talking to a few users. But I'm looking for users in the thousands, right? That's what we really go for. And yes, there are times where I've talked to users about a certain key part of the project, but necessarily what they say and what they do are very different.
Do
And it's very important that
yeah,
data is shown and recorded.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree with the bunch of two you mentioned. I also use Aptitude, but are there other tools out there that are really, really good for a growth designer?
The another one is Mixpanel. Mixpanel is a is a very good one. I didn't get to use it too well, but I know Mixpanel is a great platform, and we use a lot of Pendo for specific targeting, and Pendo is very good at getting quick information, especially if you have a promotion going on, or especially if you're trying to create guided tours and information, so the users can see how your product works, and you could record
Yeah,
that information.
yeah, yeah, great too. I think I've really heard of Pandu, but I've not used it. But I think there was a project I wanted to do that has to do with working through a customer how to use a product maybe for the first time. I think yeah, Pandu is really a great tool. So we've talked more about the traits and qualities. We talk more about understanding data. We talk more about good communication skills. We talk more about how to really, really think logically, setting goals, validating experimentation. These are all bunch of regular keywords for a growth designer. So as a newbie or as a product designer looking to really dive deep into being a growth designer, what are the steps? What are the important activities I need to really engage myself in to build or to nurture these
Mm.
qualities that you've really mentioned?
There are five key things that I would say that are very important to get into growth design if you're a product design generalist. I would say that the number one is understanding what growth design is. Right, understanding how important it is, understanding the skills it takes to make the
Yeah,
transition, and a lot of the skills you'll find it in marketing. But you really want to seek out coaches, mentors, and people to hear their perspective as well, because I am one growth designer out of thousands, right, or even tens of thousands. So, and it's a constantly an evolving field that is changing, and I don't think there is a single person that has that true deep definition. Because when I worked for Century, they had their own definition of what the growth team is, and then accepting the position at Weight Watchers, they have their own idea what growth team is. So it's very important you really understand that. Another one is, I would say, focus on your growth related skills, right? You want to have a broad set of skills. It's important that growth designers have a strong foundation of understanding conversation,
yeah,
optimization. You want to have a very strong data background, understanding how user research works from a large scale standpoint. And you want to also generally have good, again, I've said before, communication skills is very important because you need to communicate to your users, but also communicate to your leadership team why your experiment worked and how you can repeat that magic. And I would say that for another one is, it's very simple and obvious, is build your portfolio. I would say if you're brand new, you need to have your portfolio up and running, but you really want to
yeah,
focus your portfolio on growth loops and the
definitely.
AARR funnel. I think that in in a future episode, we can definitely talk about growth loops versus funnels and see how each person tackles them. But as a newbie, I would argue that focusing on funnels, having a good understanding of that, and then going into loops which is a bit more advanced, you are able to make that transition a lot easier into growth. And of course, there's your standard networking, seeking out opportunities, talking to people. You want to go to a design meetups in your area or just online, but also don't ignore the marketing ones, right?
Wow.
I know that here in Toronto, TikTok came down and they had a very big marketing meeting about why you should market yourself on TikTok. And I met many growth designers there. Right, I saw a few growth designers. I saw a few people into growth hacking, and it was something that was really cool. So I unfortunately didn't get to necessarily go there, but I saw a lot of people from all over America, all over the world come to
Yeah.
Toronto and really hear what TikTok was saying. And speaking to some of those people
Growth
walking around
designer. Yeah.
outside, they were, a lot of them really we're looking for designers. They said that we need a designer. They called it marketing designers, which is quite interesting. But they were really looking for a growth designer. And I told them what I did. And they were like, can you come work for us, right? Can you do this? Can you take on this contract, right? That's
Yeah.
very important. And lastly, for me personally, I've always continued to learn and be learning the field. I think that there aren't a lot of courses on growth design, but the few that are out there are very good. Right? I have taken them and I still look back at them. Right? As I'm at work creating something and I'm looking for a certain keyword or a certain phrase, I would go back to my course and I would find those.
Yeah, definitely. I really love those 5 points. And one other thing that I really want us to dive deep a little bit is about the portfolio thing for a newbie, because I know as
Mm,
a designer, that's one of the ethics that we really have. We are not a
yeah.
good client of ourselves. So, as a newbie coming into a growth designer, how do you put the lens of growth, just like you said, on your
Mhm,
existing project? Let's say you've worked on a project before as a generalist, as a product designer. How do
mhm,
you really put that lens of growth on some of your previous projects that could really have the sense that, yeah, I really want to do this. I want to dive deep into growth
mhm.
design. Are there any tips you can offer?
I would say that a tip that I would put a lens on a portfolio is I would add psychology principles. I would add story based driven, which is quite standard for a lot of product portfolios. But I also want people to focus on how did this benefit revenue? How did you increase activation? How did you
Yeah,
increase retention? I want to have those information, those stats, because your project may look good visually, but if the user activation isn't up, then in the eyes of the company it failed, where you didn't do
yeah,
what you're supposed to do. But also you can talk about why it did fail. Right. I had an interview where I was talking about a project and why it failed. And I think that's also very important because you want to talk about what you learned as well. Right. So I would say that if you're someone who wants to get into growth, I would say talk about loops and talk about funnels and how you're able to really increase either user retention, activation, revenue,
activation.
anything
Yeah.
like that. Because maybe you didn't know, but maybe your manager knew that this was always the intention for that. So you need to have those conversations.
Yeah, definitely. I think that really happened to me specifically because there was a time, there was a project I really worked on a contract job, and I really happened to work on this project. And not knowing to me, I was actually doing growth because I work specifically
Mhm,
on how they really onboard new customers. Primarily they used to do sort of like a sales led approach to getting new customer, but then what I really did was making them a little bit more product led, which really aligns to the philosophy of growth design. Allowing users to really jump on the project on the landing page, discover the product, note some of the values, and walk them through the stage until they become a customer. And unknown to me, I didn't really know that that was really good design. But when I get started learning about design, wow, that's and I think that's really good point. Adding some of those funnels and loop into your portfolio, which really give you more advantage in terms of uh, other designers when you're seeking for such position. I think that's really great advice. Yeah. So talking about
mhm.
one aspect you talked about, which is a curious mind, learning every time. You mentioned some courses, and definitely I will want you to touch more a little bit about. I will also leave some of these links that you talked about. I'll get some of this link from you. I will add it into the show notes. Can you talk a bit about some of the courses you've done, some books that are really good for anyone to get started with?
I would say that a big course I learned was the growth.design course. Um, The growth design course is extremely useful. There is limited space, and it is probably one of the core foundations of learning growth and taking growth to the next level. Now, I personally argue that it is not for beginners coming in. So if you have a decent, strong background as a product generalist, and you really just want to add growth to it, the growth.design course is really for you. And I think that works. And I think that works with a lot of courses. Now, if you are brand new, you can still take the course, but some of the terminology and some of the understanding may go over your head a bit. But they do get down to how to do storytelling, how to really tackle their product, and how to create. But they're not necessarily focused on how to create a UI
Well,
from a beginner standpoint.
yeah, obviously, I've been a fan of Good Dot Design for about 2 years, and
Mhm,
let me even be true. I never knew about Good Design when I've been following Good Dot Design. I
mhm.
can't remember the name of the two authors right now, but way back
Yeah,
2 years ago, I've really been following them, and only for me to recently learn more about good design, and I really fell back to the website. I really now understood, when you are looking at a product from the lens of a growth designer, it's totally different.
mhm.
Like it's totally different from a
Yeah,
product designer. So when I go back to the website again, and I think I also have to take the course because I actually on the waiting list, just like you said, it's really, really restricted.
mhm.
I'm hoping I get called this January for the new intake, but I think it's really a great course. Even some of their blogs, some of their case study are really top notch. It's really good for
Yeah,
any entry level designer to really get started and learn more about growth. I
yeah.
think I really recommend that. So,
It is.
let's really dive deep into your experience within your team, even your previous team and everything. So, as a growth designer, I know we've talked so much about the differences, we talked about the qualities, but how is a growth designer specifically different from a product designer in a team? And how do we fit in to a product team? Is it to a marketing team in an organization? So how do we fit in into a team as a growth designer or as a product designer?
Mhm.
What's the difference?
The big difference is, speaking of general product designers, right? If you're a company and you have a new feature or a new idea, right, you want the product designer to turn that idea into reality. That's essentially what we do, right? We make sure it has the best standards, the best practices, and this idea that you have is now a UI experience that your users can use. And that's really what it is. We can also talk about services and service design, but to the main focus of just focusing on a digital experience, that is the main thing that growth designers do. I'm sorry, that's the main thing that general designers do. For growth designers,
Yeah,
what we specifically focus on is certain key traits and ever. Sometimes the product is already built and you're just trying to turn it into a certain direction. Or there are times where the product
yeah,
isn't built at all and they have an idea, but your focus on again is really growth. That is the thing that is steering the rudder of your ship, right? You're really trying to say to your management team, where on the funnel, where on the loop, what are we focusing on, and how do I align this with the business goals? I am still focused on the best user experience. There are certain standards that we have
yeah,
to akin to, but if what we're trying to get to a certain theme, we're trying to hit a certain number or certain metric in there, and we're also trying to grow the product within its own product niche that will make it stand out from other products as well. You can have an amazing user experience, you can have everything coherent, but it's like I said before, what makes growth designers really stand out is where on the funnel are we focused, where on the loop are we in, and how can I drive those numbers in a certain direction, right? That is key. So if you're coming in to a team, if you're a growth designer yourself or just starting out and you're trying to market yourself to companies and to other people about what makes you so unique from a regular standard product designer, I would say that the main thing that you really want to talk about is I can make users go do a certain action. I can make your revenue, I can make your retention, I can make your activation, I can make your acquisition, all of it, I can make it go in a certain way. right? And that separates you from a generalist, right? You want to work on your design system, that's for product designers and UI designers. That's the main focus.
Yeah, absolutely great. And I really like the aspect of how a growth designer can really separate themselves. Talking about those key metrics, it's a no-brainer for any product designer out there that really want to stand out in the market because, you know, every product designer does literally the same thing. Build product from idea to a living product, but if this product doesn't really get to the end of the customer, does not really generate revenue for the company, they are not having certain numbers, certain metrics, they are not hitting those, then of what use
Yep.
is the product, right? So, and that's really a no-brainer for any designer out there who really want to stand out in this massive and big pool of talent that we have out there. So, thanks so much, Ryan. So, going down to some of the final questions, what are the books that
Mm-hmm.
you would recommend? I read it about you. You read a lot of books. I know you love design systems. I didn't want to dive deep into
Mm-hmm.
rudiment of design right now, but let's talk a little bit about books, right? As a product designer or as a growth designer,
Mm-hmm.
what are books that you really recommend out there that really, really help someone to that will help a designer to get started?
I would say that the book that I read is Better Onboarding by Crystal Higgins. I would say it's a part of the Book
Yeah,
Apart series. I think she really gets into creating better onboarding. And when I went in, I thought it was a general how to create a good onboarding experience. So this is not just onboarding; it is a better onboarding experience. And she really gets deep into how to make your onboarding experience more simple, how to really drive into a certain direction depending on your product. And she really gets into the nitty gritties about what you're really focusing on with this onboarding experience. Because a lot of us end up creating these onboarding experiences that are either very long or very short. And yes, that does appease the leadership team, but she really talks about some of the sacrifices you need to
yeah,
make on your onboarding experience because you're trying to again create that better experience. I think it's a really good read. I believe it's part 35 of the Book Apart series. I think it's definitely something that people should really pick up. And another book is Design Driven Growth by Molly Norris
yeah,
Walker. Right, she's a part of the Growth Designers.co community. Her book is an ebook, and I got to read that ebook, and I think it's a really good beginner's book as well. Right, you really want to talk about design-driven growth, and a lot of people are they call themselves pro product-led managers, product-led designers. Right. We're all part of the same ecosystem, really. And she really talks about how do you make a design-driven decision under the theme and guise of growth. Right, get those metrics in, get those numbers in, understand what these numbers mean, because there's a lot of data and information. And I think it's very important that your team processes it very well and understands how to get it working.
yeah. I think I will need to get the better onboarding. I've read
Mm-hmm.
Molly's book about the data driven design book. Yeah, and it's really, really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I know you mentioned some communities, and I want us to do like a proper intro to the community aspect, which
Mm-hmm.
I also want us to give shout out to the growth designer.co community. And
Yeah.
just to lead to that question or to that thought, what are communities out there that are really good for growth designers? Because you mentioned about networking, and I think
Mm-hmm.
joining a community is a very good aspect of networking, meeting other designers like you, the same mindset, and they could really foster your growth. So, what are the communities out there for people to join?
I would say that the number one community is the growthdesigners.co community. I think that right now they are my favorite community. I think they are just people who are genuinely interested and care a lot about growth. And I think it's a really good resource, right? Even talking about better onboarding with Crystal Higgins, she's in that group. Molly Norris is in that group. We have Brett Palmer from Mixed Panel in that group. And we have many others who are talking about growth every day in that group. And I'm really happy to be allowed in that group. Another group is that I believe that there is a group for Reforge, right? Reforge focuses on growth loops. It's pretty advanced. It's
Yeah.
a very advanced level group for different people. So if you're a beginner, I wouldn't recommend going in there. You can
Yeah.
still go in, but it is for that high level growth loops, understanding growth loops, and really pushing that forward and being a product led team. And that's what really Reforge is all about. I know that Reforge is a bit pricey per year. So
Yeah.
if your company has that, you could definitely sell that to your company and tell them we need Reforge. It makes a lot of sense. But yeah, like if you're a beginner, just enter in the growthdesigners.co.
Yeah.
Just come in there, say hi, and just ask questions and participate in the discussion because it's very important.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna put the link to the growthdesigner.co community. It's really a great community. For me, when I found the
Yeah.
community, one word that came to my mind was Eureka. Like I found people like me, and
Yeah.
it's you could
Yeah.
really relate with some of the conversations out there, and I think it's really a very good community for every good designer to be in. And shout out to
Mm-hmm.
Molly, shout out to Chitana, the former head
Mm-hmm.
of growth for Netflix. I've listened to a couple of her talks, and she's right there on the community, and they are very responsive. And I think it's really a great community for everybody to join in. Yeah. So thank you so
It
much,
is.
Ryan, for sharing your experience, your insight today. It's been
For
very,
sure.
really, really, really insightful. Like I have my notes really here, really packed. I really need to sit
Mm.
down and listen to this again and able to pick out some of those insightful information. And thanks so much
For
for
sure.
this insight. Before we sign out, I would like to
Mm-hmm.
ask these questions,
Yeah.
just like a sign out question. Um, if you're not a designer, like right now, what profession or what job do you think you would have been?
If I wasn't a designer, would it be cheating to say I want to become an architect? That was actually my second choice
Uh,
to really get into. I really like architecture. Would that count as design still, or would you
ah,
consider that completely separate? That's where the ultimate debate comes in. Is industrial design
yeah,
considered
exactly.
normal standards of design?
Yeah, I don't think it's really cheating. I think it's another profession because
Mm,
it's really different. The mindset is different, from being a product
it is.
designer. Yeah, yeah. I think
I love architecture.
yeah, I think that's really great. I actually have a very funny background too. I actually studied civil engineering in school, so
Nice.
I. but then, achieving the same goal of improving lives. We
Hmm.
build structures to improve life as a civil engineer, but as a product designer, building as a product
Hmm.
designer, we are building experiences for people to live good life. So equally achieving the goal of improving
Hmm.
lives, but in a different form actually. So it's really amazing to
Hmm.
see how designers come from different backgrounds, different perspective, and yet we are really, really improving lives and product every day, and
Hmm.
it's really
Yeah,
amazing.
it's Yeah, for sure. No, really, it's very important that we all stay together and we all communicate with each other. And I think it's very good that I think growth design in 2023 is going to have a massive explosion. I'm seeing a lot of chatter, a lot of people reaching out to me on LinkedIn. A lot of people are asking me to create content around it, which is very surprising. So I ended up creating a Instagram account called Ryan on Growth. I haven't filled it yet, but I'm going to be filling it with content in 2023, and I'll be using that name across all my socials and platforms. So it's very interesting how many people are now seeing growth, and it's very interesting
Yeah,
to see
amazing.
that we no longer need to justify our existence
Yeah.
because a lot of the time when you join a team, if your team or your company is asking you why does growth exist, if you have those feelings, then that's not the right team for you, right? You don't want to be in a position to justify your role. And I think that's especially unfair for such a new role as well. So definitely going forward, I really believe in 2023, you're going to be seeing a lot of people talking and focusing on growth.
Yeah, thanks so much, Ryan. So for people to really find you, I know you've talked about a little bit about Ryan on design, but can you dive deep into how people can reach out to you, where they can find you, where they can read more about you for people that want to check you out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. So if you go to linkedin.com/Ryan Walsh Design, that is the place you can find me. You can also find my Instagram, Ryan on Growth, and you can also find that on Medium as well, Ryan on Growth as well. And overall this year, I'll be putting out a lot of content focusing on growth, and you'll be seeing more and more of my face around in the different communities. So those are two places, but definitely if you reach out to me on Instagram or Twitter, I'll definitely be replying to everyone. They're all still brand new because I was very focused on studying growth instead of putting myself out there.
Yeah,
So now that I feel like I have very deep knowledge in this field and just through my whole career, right? I've always been caught between marketing and tech, but I never got to be called a growth designer. Now that I have that title and my experience, I'm definitely be creating a lot of content out there. So search up Ryan on Growth, one word, and you'll be able to find me.
yeah, super great. I'm gonna add some of those links. I'll get those links from Ryan, and I'll add those links to the show notes. Please do it to check the show notes. You can reach out to Ryan. He's very responsive on social, so feel free to reach out to him, and he's definitely going to answer you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for this time. I'm short of words. I'm absolutely blown out with the wealth of knowledge that you really shared here today. It's really insightful, even from what I've really written down. I really
Mm-hmm.
want to appreciate you for the time. I'm very sure that we'll have you more often on the show. I know you are always available to talk about and
Mm-hmm.
chat about growth. Thanks so much for that.
Yep, for sure. And thank you for creating this podcast where people can talk about this and understand it, that they're not alone. So you're doing really good work out there. And I think it's going to be a really good podcast in the future. It's going to be quite big.